This show contains language that is unsuitable for children.
Grant us love filled with good intention. May we find peace in the midst of dissension. We not what they make us, though they try to break us. And seeking love us, giving love.
Hey, and welcome to Giving Myself Permission, a path to psychological reparation. Now, you might be saying, what the hell? Every time she records, it's something different. You're right. And I'm going to keep doing that, changing it until I get the rhythm. I think I got it, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I am your host, Dr. Penny Murray. This space is for those of us who have been taught to push through, to be resilient, like it's some kind of badge of honor, but we're never encouraged to pause, exhale, and heal. What I like to describe as just ministering to our souls. Now, in this space, we give ourselves permission to feel, to remember, and to reconnect with our sacred expressive life force. That part of us that still knows how to trust, create, and live in our purpose. Each one of these episodes, as we move forward, I'm going to unpack the hidden ouch that lives in our stories and the unspoken truth that's waiting underneath it all. In future episodes, I'll explain what I mean by healing that hidden ouch, because it's not to minimize the pain and the grief that we have in our lives, especially as African Americans. Now, this is not just about healing for today. It's about mending our inner fractures that is inherited from generations before us. So just breathe, reflect, and walk with me on this path of psychological self-reparation. Let me first say that Giving Myself Permission is brought to you by the Learning Spa Cultural Inner Wellness Retreat. It's my vision for a path to psychological self-reparation, where inner wellness is a proactive commitment, not a reactive liability. We're in the early stages of development and acquiring the property, so we really need your support in donating to our building fund. Go to pennymurray.com to learn more about my vision and to donate to our building efforts. Let's get started. I believe in setting intentions and asking the ancestors for guidance and support. So let's just take a moment to give our Sacred Expressive Life Force permission to cut through the noise of the day and to be in ritual to receive an ancestral download. That's what I like to call this particular segment, to just kind of relax and take a moment. Because rituals usher in psychological self-reparation, and it really encourages us to reclaim our breath, our minds, and more importantly, our magic. And the ancestral download for this episode comes from Dr. Melodoma Patrice Somé and his book, Ritual, Power, Healing, and Community. Dr. Somé was from the Dagara tribe in West Africa and passed on into the spirit world in 2021. Until his death, he was a practicing shaman and medicine man for his tribe. He also did tremendous work in teaching the Western world how to reestablish our relationship with the tribal ancestral world and contemporary culture through ritual. So he was always trying to teach how to blend those two, as our ancestors did when they were brought to the American shores, where they blended American customs to our ancestral or African rituals and culture. And that's what Dr. Somé always did until his passing. This is what author and scholar Michael Mead said about Dr. Somé's work of connecting us to ritual and our ancestors. He said, to follow Melodoma into the tribal realm, to cross the threshold into a other world of the ancestors, it's necessary to relinquish the ideal that all mysteries can be explained if there's enough time to develop an explanation. This requires rediscovering the imagination that the Western world attributes only to children and madmen. So let me just give you my thoughts on what Mead was saying about Dr. Somay's work. I just think that to begin this sacred work, we are invited into a quiet moment of ancestral remembrance, one that asks us to soften our grip on logic and to let the invisible speak. In the spirit of Melodoma's wisdom, healing the hidden wound, what I call the ouch, carried in the morals of African American history requires more than analysis, diagnosis, and intellect. I think it requires ritual. Matter of fact, I know it does. And I know this to be true because I'm feeling that I'm practicing ritual now and I'm feeling the difference in my life. But this ritual is a crossing back through the unseen doorways our ancestors left ajar for us. The sacred fellowship doesn't ask for perfection. It only asks that we be willing and available. And that's one of the things that I think that we will find hardest, to just be available without questioning what is really happening. Now, this is not about figuring it out, but feeling through it. That has been the secret formula for me. It's about trusting the invisible energy force, the unspoken truths, the emotional inheritance, the sacred callings that connect us to something more profound than just reason and intellect. Our sacred expressive life force lives in this mystery, in this energy. It is the part of us that was never broken. It was only silenced. We were forced into a conditioning and indoctrination that suppress who we really are. To cross that threshold, though, is to reclaim our right to imagine beyond survival, to give ourselves permission to see with the inner eye and to heal, not just for ourselves, but for all of those who came before us who were never allowed to. So for me, this is the ritual of psychological self-reparation. Remember, the world's message is always telling us to grind, to hustle. But psychological self-reparation says pause and come back to ritual. Now, in this episode, I want to share an experience I had that triggered me to a point that I was pissed off. While I didn't know it at the time, it turned out that situation was a spiritual initiation ritual, and it guided me toward greater clarity and growth around my work. Now, I won't lie. I'm not going to lie. I reached a state of righteous indignation during this particular situation that I'm going to share with you later on. But while working through my shit, I stumbled up on the term psychological reparation. So you're going to keep hearing me say that a lot. Just to be honest, until that situation really happened to me that I'm going to share with you, I wasn't aware of this term at all. For the longest time, though, I kept feeling that there was an aspect of activism to my work, but everything I knew about activism was around legal, political, racial, or economic injustices. And none of that really rang true or resonated with what I knew divine oneness had given me to do. But before I get into all of that, I gotta do my 2 cents. I see this segment as a call to the ancestors, an honoring of Black history, not just once a year, but as a 365 sacred continuum of memory, meaning, and momentum. And again, I've changed this a little bit as well. Originally, this was talking about past ancestors and the things that they did and so forth, so on. But there is so much of that information out there now that Spirit kept telling me I needed to go in another direction. So each episode of My Two Cents is going to give voice to our healing through short yet layered lessons that help us cross the threshold of the doorways that our ancestors have left open for us to cross over into. Now, the truth is we carry the unspoken ouch, the generational ache buried in our cellular memory and the marrow of our story as African Americans. But don't get it twisted. We also carry something virtuous, something fierce, a sacred expressive life force that has consistently remained determined, dynamic, regenerative, and resolute through everything. So let's just jump into this first mini lesson that Spirit is guiding me to do in this particular segment. Now, we hear all the time that we're all connected, that there's some divine oneness linking all of us together. But for many of us, that feels like just another overused phrase or woo-woo babble. What we actually feel most days is conflict, mistrust, and distance, even in our most intimate spaces, like our families, our intimate partnerships, and even our friendships. And let's just be real. Talk of love and forgiveness, that sounds really great. It really does. Until somebody pisses you off, oversteps your boundaries, disregards your truth, or you're still bleeding from some kind of past betrayal or hurt. Now, the ideal of this first mini lesson is simple. If we really want to repair the inner damage that we've inherited, we have to stop pretending that logic and an analysis alone can do the job. It's just not enough. I have this conversation a lot with people, especially because, my degree is in psychology. That has really been my Achilles heel sometimes because I keep leaning on the academic reasoning and the logic behind things, theories and research. But sometimes that's just not enough. And I know it's not enough. So I think it's time to seriously consider psychological self-reparation, which involves unlearning the lies we've been taught that keep us locked into mediocrity. This means engaging with more than just our minds. It requires reconnecting with the deeper parts of ourself, spirit, memory, and yes, the wisdom in our pain. And that's the real thing for me. That's the real juicy essence of all of the things that I want to do in this podcast and through my work to get to the wisdom of the pain. So I want to start by looking at the soul star chakra, not in a mystical or complicated way, but as an alternative perspective. But first things first, okay, because I'm quite sure everybody is aware of the word chakras and what that really means. And if you don't, I'll just throw it out here. Chakras are frequencies of light and subtle tones that run along the spine within an envelope of energy that's called the central light column. Now, each chakra supports the balance, health, and wellness of our body, mind, and spirit. Most of us are familiar with the 7 chakras. However, our life force is made up of many more chakras, and specifically a 12 chakra system that includes 5 additional external chakras. Now, this mini lesson briefly explores one of the 5 external chakras, the 8th chakra, known as the soul star, or our true path. And that is connecting us with something greater than our everyday noises. Now, the soul star is about 12 inches above our crown chakra. I guess if you raise your hand above your head, that would be about 12 inches above your head. At least it is for me, all right? It's considered to be a repository of soul level energy, all kinds of juicy stuff that connects us to our soul's essence and purpose. Now, I embrace the soul star as the unseen bridge that allows us access to the doorway our ancestors left cracked open for us to reclaim our inner knowing that is older and wiser than our fears. And so this is really important because embracing it as that unseen bridge allows us to access that doorway to gain a greater knowledge. But both the soul star and the crown chakras are connected to spiritual awareness. However, they serve totally different purposes. For instance, the crown chakra represents our ego-driven relationship with spirit. However, at this level of consciousness, we perceive ourselves as separate entities receiving guidance. In contrast, while the crown chakra receives divine guidance, the soul star chakra embodies it. The soul star says you already are the guidance. You're not just receiving truth, you are truth. Now, some refer to this consciousness as our authentic self or the knowing self. I refer to it as our sacred expressive life force, the part of us that's been waiting to speak with our full voice, not just our survival voice. I think that we're all familiar with the survival voice, but not that full voice that really express our truth. At first, when I was learning about the soul star chakra, I go walking every day, almost every day. And there is this water fountain that I pass, and I always stop to meditate, and I honor the ancestors because the water has meaning as well. And so when I think about our divine oneness, that we are all connected, I think about that water fountain. As I sit there and watch the water in this pond, the water in that pond is one big body of water, but that as the water moves, that there's ripples that flow towards me. And each one of those ripples are unique in and of themselves, in size, in length, in height. Sometimes the water has bubbles on it. Those ripples or those bubbles are a part of the water. They're not separate from the water. They are the water. And so thinking about the soul star chakra and saying that we're not just receiving truth, we are truth. You can look at it as the ripples in that water. It's not separate from the water. It is the water. It's just being expressed differently. Okay. I think I'm going to do an extended mini lesson on the soul star chakra on my YouTube channel. I'll let you know when that happens. But you got to sign up. Go to my website and sign up to be a part of my mailing list. All right. So why does this information matter? Healing the ouch that we carry, those emotional scars that are not just ours, but the scars passed down from oppression, imposed inferiority, and stolen history, requires more than reflection. It calls for active unlearning and engaging in rituals to rebuild self-trust. Listen, I'm not here to promote emotional indulgence, spiritual bypassing, toxic positivity, or passive hope, because as African Americans, we carry a tremendous residue of intergenerational emotional distress and damage. But I also strongly argue we also have incredible spiritual tenacity woven into our DNA. And that doggedness is the light that's buried under the rubble. All of that bullshit that we have been conditioned or told that we are. It's all that light is under there, waiting for us to reclaim it, to remember it. And it is that light that's guiding us towards self-healing and emotional reparation. And we return to that light through rituals of alignment, consciously activating our soul star connection. Now, reclaiming ourself or our sacred expressive life force allows us to access a truth that is deeper than our pain, broader than our fear, and more ancient than any of those bullshit oppressions that our people have gone through as African Americans. We can then expel generations of negative conditioning and indoctrination when we tap in to that sacred expressive life force, our soul star connection. We can unlearn it if we really get involved in spending more time in that space of our soul star connection. Okay? All right. That's my 2-cent deposit into the inner wellness self-reparation account.
They say you won't, but you gotta stay focused. They gon' try their best.
Now let's get into the world according to Penn. This is what I said. This is my story I want to tell you guys, okay? But I'm going to start off with this. Marie-Louise von Franz wrote this: "One must be wounded to become a healer. Many people experience suffering, but that doesn't necessarily mean they become healers. If it solely depended upon the pain and suffering we endure, anyone could become a healer. However, we truly become healers only when we learn to alchemize the suffering and pain that caused the wound in the first place. The pain and suffering we experienced are unique to each of us, and we must follow the path of our spiritual evolution to uncover the reason for our trauma. So when we're seeking to understand our traumas, we're actually seeking the deeper meaning of our lives. Too many of us walk around with more than just the wounds of our personal struggles. As African Americans, listen, we carry the injuries, the fears, the doubts, and other psychological damages of past generations. We all do. Okay, some of us, deny it more than others, but nonetheless, no one can refute the recurring psychological hell African Americans endure even today. But we often overlook that we also have a spiritual directive: physician, heal yourself. Now, those of you who are familiar with the European Christian Bible, it says, physician, heal thyself. So let me just kind of share with you my story. I don't know a damn thing about fundraising, but I did an advertising campaign for the Learning Spa Building Fund, because I'm trying to build this facility, and I continue to do it, but I'm lousy at it. Okay. Cause like I said, I don't know a damn thing about it. And usually when I do advertisements, I rarely get any response from it at all. But I was surprised because I received a phone call from a young woman that I didn't know. And she introduced herself and told me that she came across my advertisement. I was surprised about that and kind of pleased. All right. But at least my money got one person. So, and she said she was excited about my vision. At least that's what she said. She then asked me what had motivated, me for this particular vision that I have. And when I began to explain to her that it was the grief around the recent death of my mother and the social challenges that the African American community was going to be facing with this reelection of Felon 47, she kind of cut me off, saying that she wasn't into all of that political stuff. And I thought it was a tad bit rude, but you know what? I'm a nice person. So I just kind of I stopped mid-sentence, and then she immediately pivoted with a sales pitch about her fundraising skills. She was listing all of the other people that she had helped, and none of them, I didn't know any of them, but she was just going on and on about these people. And I didn't know any of them. And how she went on to say that fundraising was just her thing. Now, I felt some kind of way during this phone call, but I couldn't identify what it was, so I just engaged in the conversation. Long story short, she asked to meet for lunch. And I agreed, thinking that we would have a chance to learn more about each other and to see if it would be a good fit to work together. And of course, I'm not going to lie, I was happy about someone being excited about my work, because many times I feel like I'm on this island by myself and trying to figure shit out. But anyway, we met and she was friendly enough for someone that you're meeting for the first time. But after we sat down, she led with, "I hope you take this in love. You're really wounded and I'm going to pray for you." It hit me like a slap. She didn't know me beyond the quick phone call we had the week before. But somehow she felt entitled to diagnose me. I thought she was moved by my vision and wanted to start building a professional relationship. Instead, I found myself on the defense. And she casually dropped the names of local celebrities that she knew and all the events that she had attended. And she went on to point out that my lack of social media followers, and insisted that I needed to get those numbers up. And I felt she was implying, and this is just the world according to Penny, this is the segment here. I felt she was implying that I wasn't successful enough to be taken serious. And so it felt like she was measuring my worth against some kind of stupid ass social media algorithm. And when we parted, she said something that was like sounds of fingernails scratching on a chalkboard. She says to me, "Nobody wants to be around a low vibrational person." Now, maybe I'm tripping, but I took that statement as she was referring to me. I'm going to leave it right there. She walked away accomplished and tall. I watched her as she walked away. Me, I walked away feeling ambushed and diminished. I got to my car. I got in and I sat there, staring out the window, just numb. Didn't start the car, none. I just sat there. I knew what had happened, but I wasn't sure what happened. I've always been that person who is self-reflective, maybe too much. And as I reflected on this interaction as a witness, dissecting my emotions and my behavior, I questioned myself, what did I say or do that gave her such a low impression of who I was? And then the tears came, not out of sadness, but anger and grief. I was angry that I let her define me, even for that one damn minute. Okay? In that moment, I was pissed. I let her define me. Then I moved into grief because I had reverted back. This was an old behavior that I was familiar with, too familiar with. The old behavior of defending myself to gain approval from someone who didn't know a damn thing about me. So for the next 10, 15 minutes or so, I just sit there. And then finally, I started to relax in my grief, my anger, and my thoughts. And then I just began to breathe through it. I finally recentered myself and I asked Divine Oneness, what in the hell was I meant to learn from that encounter? And then I just left it there. I just left it there. I shook it off, squared my shoulders, started the car. And then I just, as I began to drive home though, I turned on Sirius XM to catch, I just wanted to catch one of my favorite talk shows on Urban View. And within seconds, I heard my girl, Reese Colbert. Now, I say my girl. I don't know her from Adam. I just listen to her all the time on Urban View. And she is my standard bearer. And she was shouting, just as I turned it on, she was shouting her favorite phrase while she was talking to one of the callers. I don't know what the caller had said or whatever, but the caller was attempting to avoid taking responsibility for what he had said. And so she firmly said, listen, I'm not here to judge you, but if that's what you think, stand in it. Own your shit. You ain't got to make no excuses. Stand in it and own your shit. When she said that, just like that, the lesson was clear. The lesson was clear. Yes, I'm wounded. I've been through some shit. I have nothing to be ashamed of. But that doesn't make me less than. Again, as I said, I was angry because I had allowed that woman who didn't know me make a determination and shift my energy to the point that I was, in fact, that low vibrational woman. So again, it didn't make me less than, it just makes me human. It makes me honest. And when Reese rebuked her rebuke to that man, even though she was talking to him, Divine Oneness used her rebuke towards that caller as a divine intervention for me to get my shit back in order. If being wounded was my truth, then I needed to stand in it, own my shit. When she said to me, "You really wounded, I'm going to pray for you," I could have said to her, "Well, you can keep you can pray if you want to, but I don't need them because my wound is my power." I didn't say that shit. I went back to that old person. And as I said earlier, it was motivated by, I'm feeling like I'm always on an island trying to do this shit by myself. And here's somebody who's saying they're interested. It was that shit that pissed me off. And then I began to grieve it. But as I said, if being wounded was my truth, then I needed to stand in it. I needed to own it, not to defend it, not to sugarcoat it, just stand in it because it was my truth. In fact, it really comes down to how I've been able to acknowledge my wounds and alchemize each and every one of them damn wounds. I've alchemized them to use them as energy, as strength, to propel me to the next place, to the next level of this path that I'm on. And if you remember in the last episode, I said, you can be wounded and powerful. You can be afraid and chosen. You can be unsure and unstoppable. These conflicting truths of dual realities live in all of us. So I'm just going to say, I am so thankful for the universe always using some kind of raggedy ass shit to elevate my awareness. That incident really drove me to ask the what and why of my reaction in that situation, moving me to seek even more counsel from my Sacred Expressive Life Force. When I got my little caramel ass home, I went right into true meditation to get greater clarity of my purpose. In that moment, as I was meditating, I was reminded of the years ago during one of my clumsy prayers, long before I even understood what healing work really meant. Divine Oneness had told me I was a healer. But at that time, I didn't believe it because I was going through one of the darkest periods in my life. But looking back, I understand now. The wounds that resulted from that time in my life weren't meant to cripple me or destroy me. They were meant to prepare me for this path that I am currently on. Doing the work to alchemize those wounds, act as a bridge between our physical experiences and our soul star energy. This enables us to cross the threshold of the doors that the ancestors has left open for us so that we can tap into the wisdom within us. A stranger that day labeled me as wounded. Divine Oneness reminded me that I'm a healer. The ancestors wanted me to know more about my backstory, which led me to the theory of the wounded healer. So, over the next few episodes, I want to discuss the power our scars carry. Now, just to preview, Carl Jung introduced the term wounded healer in the 1950s. His theory doesn't mean that we're broken beyond repair. It means we carry wounds that society often overlooks or mislabels, pain that we've learned to mask, ignore, or minimize. But when we stop pretending that we're not wounded We begin to see the wisdom in our scars. Many of us walk around with untapped wisdom cut off from our intrinsic knowledge and creativity because we've been conditioned to see our wounds as weaknesses. But the scars we carry are proof of our fortitude and serves as guideposts towards our spiritual agreement. Our wounds don't disqualify us from being whole. In fact, they often qualify us to be the voice someone else needs to hear. When embraced as a means to elevate our consciousness, our wounds begin to open the doors to both personal and collective transformation. Now, as I mentioned earlier, wearing our wounds as symbols of martyrdom doesn't make us healers. Only when we realize that our vulnerabilities, which are shaped by our wounds, become our strength and our greatest virtues, that we become the healers the world needs right now. We embody the sacred expressive life force of ancient agreements, agreements older than the soil we stand on, older than the fears we feel. And yes, our inherited wounds contain a wealth of timeless wisdom. If you remember, even in the last episode where I talked about how the Native Americans knew that we were to lead this country to wellness, not this country, but humanity to wellness. But we have to heal ourselves. The long generational history of African Americans' struggle, pain, and suffering is our source of strength. And it's a channel for becoming a more effective healer for others. And it damn sure makes us more than qualified to meet the social challenges that we face today. But only if we are willing to heal the ouch within us, individually and collectively. Now, through the lens of ancestral knowing and our personal experiences, we can uncover how our deepest wounds are a clue to our life's purpose. It took me years and a divine scrimmage with a stranger who's been taught to view wounds as a shortcoming to remind me and awaken me to the wounded healer that lives within me.
But you gotta stay focused.
Now, as we close out today's conversation, I want to leave you with a self-reparation ritual, because breaking the chains of emotional pain and injury isn't always loud, boastful, or aggressive. Often, it's a quiet refusal to engage in self-abandonment. As long as we feel victimized, bitter, or resentful towards the experiences that wounded us, or we try to deny them, we will remain inescapably bound to those very wounds. From a psychologist's standpoint, this is neurotic, self-imposed suffering, which is totally different from the authentic, purifying grief and sorrows of a wounded healer. Our emotional wounds have purpose, and we choose whether they destroy us or they wake us up. Now, the purpose for this ritual is about moving from being bound by our emotional wounds to becoming the stewards of ancestral wisdom. So here's your self-reparation ritual, and I call it ancestor check-in. When you find yourself in a divine scrimmage or conflict like I did, even if it's old thoughts and condemnation that's going on inside your head, it ain't got to include nobody else. Maybe it's just you and your shit. I want you to just take a moment. You can close your eyes or you can keep it open, but I want you to say aloud, who walked through this before me? Think about the situation that you were in, and then say aloud, who walked through this before me? What would they want for me now? What would they want for me now? Because I need you to tap into, they've learned some shit. Okay, the ancestors have learned something. So you got to check in with them and say, what is it that they would want me to learn from what they learn? You know that old saying, if I only knew then what I know now? Well, the ancestors are there trying to give us that kind of information. So just who walked through this before me and what would they want for me now? Don't force the answer. Don't intellectualize it. Just listen. Don't listen for voices, but for clarity. That's it. No deep breathing, no incense, none of that kind of stuff. Just naming what challenges you in that moment and calling your energy back through the ancestors. All right? Now, once you feel centered, just simply say, I carry this not as a burden, but as a blueprint. What they survived, we talk about the ancestors, what they survived, I now transform. The healing begins with me and it honors them. All right. I appreciate you sharing this space with me. I hope you will keep listening and join me in creating your own rituals of self-reparation. If this episode resonated with you, leave me a comment. Hit the like button because that moves the needle on the whole algorithm bullshit, which I don't give a shit about. I'm about teaching us to heal. Better yet, you can subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend about it. Go to my website, pennymurray.com, and remember to join the mailing list. Also, you can just kind of sit with this information for a few days, but just be gentle with yourself, all right? You can also follow me on Instagram, Threads, or Facebook. I'm horrible at that, but you can follow, okay? And it's at Sacred Expressive Life Force on all of those social medias. Sacred Expressive Life Force, all one word, on Instagram, Threads, or Facebook. Giving Myself Permission is brought to you by The Learning Spa, a sacred vision for psychological self-reparation and cultural inner wellness. We're building that space brick by brick, prayer by prayer, and offering by offering. So visit pennymurray.com to learn how you can be a part of this movement of mental and emotional self-reparation. And again, remember to get on my mailing list so that you can get notifications of upcoming events as I grow through this whole process. Lastly, in a couple of months, I'm going to be releasing the revised version of my book, Giving Myself Permission, Putting Fear and Doubt in Their Place. So you got to sign up so that you'll know when it's coming out. All right. Next week's episode is going to be called Healed Enough to Hold My Wounds Differently. And I want to continue exploring the wounded healer archetype and how our Sacred Expressive Life Force, the Soul Star Chakra, helps us move to a consciousness where our wounds become a bridge between suffering and wisdom. It's a bridge between pain and compassion. It becomes a bridge between trauma and transformation. And I also want to briefly discuss in that episode the difference between wounded warrior and wounded healer. Two different things, okay? All right. Until next time, realize we're in a time where it's all hands on deck. And we must clarify how our sacred activism will be expressed. But just keep in mind, it's not always demonstrated by a protest sign or in a march. Sometimes it's behind the scene gestures. Sometimes it's a whisper that says, I give myself permission to reveal my life's truth. And as always, you are never the victim of life. You are always the student of purpose. So what skill or higher consciousness are you learning? What task or message are you being prepared for? Ashe.
free audio post-production by alphonic.com.